Okay, now it's being recorded. So I guess I could recap it just real quickly again. So save for web, again, is just file, export, save for web. You want the 2-up on so you can see the original size and the outputted size. You can zoom in and out, and then you just change your quality so that the output is around half a megabyte or less. And then again, these save the PDF option for I forgot what the heck I'm talking about. The PDF outputting option. So we go to save as, go to Photoshop PDF, hit save. Right here, sorry, press quality. That's the word I was blanking on, the phrase. All we need to do is change it to press quality, which reduces it from a large file size, which you would normally use for printing, down to just what we need for previewing, and then you'd hit save. So pretty cut and dry, pretty simple, cuts down in size. And knowing this kind of stuff is really useful in terms of not only managing your own content well, but also when you're working with other people to give them multiple options, you know, so that they're not having to email you back or contact you back. Oh, hey, I need something else because what you sent me doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. You could always give people more than what they ask for, and then you're covered. So if there's no questions, we can go ahead and quit that for now. Wednesday's class, just a reminder, we're going to be meeting in individual breakout groups. Hopefully that works for us this time. Should, I mean, we changed platforms, so it should be good. So make sure you get your sketches uploaded like tomorrow night by midnight, I think is what I asked for, so that when we get in class, everybody's is on there. And yeah, just make sure you get your project turned in on time with all the required stuff. Go to the project page and review everything, right? I even have the grade sheet on there, so if you want to review that, right? What else? So yeah, we're just covering the first part 1 of this exercise. For those of you who are newer, forget how to use the pen tool, we're going to cover that first. And then we're going to go down through and really focus on using the type tool and how to create and modify vector points and vector lines, right? You're like the building blocks of this program. And the whole theory behind that is once you understand how to use these basic building blocks, then as you expand outward, you should be able to still retain that ability to modify that content with that understanding of how the building blocks are being implemented. Okay. We will start to get into Pathfinder a little bit today, but we'll cover more stuff on next Monday when we get back to this. So firstly, I hope you all can go ahead and, if you're following along with this, or you can just watch if you're already done it, the practice file. So here it is. Command 0 gets it nice and big. So just as a quick orientation here, similar to Photoshop, the layout's pretty much the same. You can rearrange things the same way. So if you wanted a different layout, I usually recommend starting out with the typography workspace, but all of the features are literally just turn on and off here anyway. So today we're going to be using layers. We will touch on color guide, which is here. And we will be using the character panel for sure. Beyond that, we have all the tools on the left as we did in Photoshop as well. It does look like we have the ability to click the edit toolbar. And this time we can actually add tools, unlike how I was trolled in Photoshop, thinking we could not. So if anything's not showing up there or you wanted to investigate further, looks like there's a whole plethora of additional features under the edit toolbar. So you could bring stuff, you know, bring that bloat over here or whatever. Yep, and then the options panel at the top is, you know, that evolves based on whatever object and or tools that you're using. Beyond that, the only other thing I can really say is we do have similar kind of effects that we could be playing with, like Photoshop effects. You could play around with these. I really wouldn't overly focus on them because they'll make cool effects maybe, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not like going to be the most important aspect of like reading your image, right? These are more like finishing touch kind of things if you wanted to play around with them. If you feel like you need some other uses of tools, but most of the time, most projects, I don't have you really, most people don't really play with these. That's more like a Photoshop exploration, at least for this project is concerned. In a way, it's kind of like the lazy way out, if you want to think about it that way, because you're just hitting a button and seeing what happens rather than like crafting, designing something. I'm not sure if that makes any more sense. So down here, we should actually have this locked shapes layer actually locked. So you want to lock that. And we'll select the practice layer because we're going to be drawing on that. And as a pen practice little example here, we're going to be using the pen tool. So we'll go ahead and grab that. And we're just going to be replicating these different shapes. So the first one's a zigzag, then a wave, then a solid shape, and then like a curved solid shape. So the first example, all we're doing is clicking and letting go on each of these like what looks like vector points. And if you have snapping on, if you have guides on, it should make it kind of easy. They can be annoying, but the whole point here is that after you click, you should see like the guide following your cursor to show you where the line's going to be placed if you click again. So all we're doing is going along, and when we get to the end, all we do is hit escape, and that will, you know, finish the line. At this point, I want you to also notice that your line that you're making, even though here in this example of mine, my current stroke color is red, you can't really see the red on my screen because it's showing up as blue. Well, like, what's the blue mean? The layer itself is colored blue. So like if we were to double click on this little thumbnail, we could change the color of the layer. And so not only does it show blue up here on the actual selection, but in the layer itself, it shows you a little indicator on whatever layer there is currently a selection. You see? And so there is a benefit to that. We'll talk more about that on next Monday. We'll recap. But so yeah, like if we were to use the selection tool now, you know, we could rotate it, we could do any of these things, but if we just click off, you should see that it'll kind of go to the standard default there. If you guys had it pop up and there's like, you know, a fill, like a color there, it's literally because you just have a fill selected beforehand. And you'll notice because we didn't finish the shape, we just hit escape. There is no enclosed line, so it's not a solid shape. It's an open-ended shape. And because of that, you can run into different problems if you were to like modify this as it was a shape. So generally, if you're gonna make a line, just make a line and leave it a line. If you're gonna make a shape, enclose the shape, finish it. So we'll talk about a shape in a second. Let's go on to number 2. Grab this pen tool again. And I just like to use usually I just use the keyboard shortcuts, like P for pen. So this one, we're actually clicking and dragging our line out. And as soon as you drag it out, you'll notice the handles come out. Handles that come out on both sides. And all we're doing is using that faint line as a guide. And we're scrolling to the end of that line. And it should kind of snap even if your defaults are the same as my defaults. Oops, I think I double clicked. So you just click and drag and let go, and then you go down and click and drag and let go. And it is important to do it even on the first one, because if we just clicked and then went down, it's gonna, and I drag the second line, it's still only, you know, curving from the second point up. So you do have to actually do it per spot. And you don't even have to be accurate here. The whole point is like to just get that initial practice of, if you want to curve, you have to click and drag. Pretty simple. And again, not making a whole shape. So we just hit escape when we want to be done. And that is it. Okay. Number 3. Again, just starting on a corner, and it's just going to click and let go. Right? Clicking and letting go all the way around. And when you get to the end, it will show you a little circle on that origin point, just like in Photoshop when we were using, I think, did we use the pen tool? Or we might have skipped the pen tool. I can't remember. Photoshop, similar process though. And once you create, or you click that last point, your line will not continue. It'll end and you've made that shape. So while it's still selected, right, you just were working with it. If you do change the color now of the fill, it will fill that color. Okay. And we'll do the last one, and then I'll give you some additional points to consider. That was not intended to be a pun. That was very bad. It's a very bad pun. This again, we're clicking and dragging out. And we're just going along. The last one here is like, I drew it backwards and I've just been way too lazy to go in and do it again. So you just got to drag it over, and if you kind of estimate the other side ending same spot. That's all you really need. Same thing over here. And then the origin point again, except you're not clicking and letting go, you're clicking and dragging on the end point as well. And the thing to remember about dragging on an endpoint is it also will modify the origin curve as well. So you have to kind of meet it in the middle as it were. Meet it in the middle as it were. I don't know. Sounds to me like an English old worldy. I don't know. Words. So if we're all done, if we go up and grab or tap the selection tool again, the top black selection tool, we should get that shape to be selected. If we click off of it and click back onto it, I don't know why we have to do that, to be honest. But anyway, you should now see that the options panel is altered for that shape. And so we could like increase the stroke size, or we could change the uniformity of that stroke. And these are more or less quick ways to, create a change. You can obviously, we're going to be going into pretty elaborate detail on creating content from scratch. So, but it's always a lot better to start with something, right? You start with something that kind of helps you with the time, and then you work your way down from there, up from there, whatever you want to say. Any questions on the pen tool? I usually get like one person per class that doesn't quite grasp the dragging, and I'm surprised that nobody's asked me today yet. Okay, well, no questions. We can go ahead and hit Command W, Control W to close this, and we don't have to save. And then we're going to do a create new. And why don't we just do a web, like a web standard kind of thing. And let's title it as exercise 2. And for me, it's section 2, so I know which one we were working with. Within Illustrator, we do have the option of setting a bleed. And I can show you guys that in a second, like what that does. Let's just hit create for now. Alrighty. And we could save it first, get that started.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
Do you know how on your like side panel situation you have like a lot of like colors and stuff like that, and like you can change the font and whatnot? How do you get that? Because I only have properties, layers, libraries on mine.
Yep. So all of these are just set defaults depending on what yours pops up open as originally. That's what I was kind of going over at the beginning again, was Didn't I go over this typography? I think I did.
Yeah, I set it as that, but it still doesn't have that.
Yeah, so like if I reset my typography, yeah, I'll have properties, layers, libraries. Is that what you have?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So for example, this will give you, if you tab open this expanded panel, it will give you a lot more stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I had already preemptively condensed it last class because just saving space so you guys have a smaller window to look at. But if you don't have all the preferences here that you are going to be wanting, you literally just go to window and just select whichever ones you want to be turning on.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, so I'm going to be turning on the color guide and bringing that over here. And a lot of this stuff I don't even need. Oh, layers I need. Get down there, layers. And oh, swatches. Swatches can be good. I'll talk about well, I'll just tell a little blurb right now. Swatches, if you find a cool color you like and you want to save that color, you could always just create a new swatch and name it. I'm not gonna, I'll close that for now. Open type, paragraph, appearance, transparency. I don't need character styles or paragraph styles, but those are helpful for layout design. We're not really doing that either. Alrighty, so yeah, as I said, go ahead and save it so you have it already set up. This way, as we go along, you just Command S as every so often. And first thing we're gonna do is gonna be playing around with the type tool. And we'll just go ahead and select that. And then instead of just tapping, like to start typing, like that, we're gonna click and drag. And if we do it for a big chunk of the window here, it'll allow us to make a nice large word. And by default, it just puts some placeholder text in there in Latin, which has always been a feature in InDesign. So they just introduced this in, I think in probably Adobe CC, I don't know, at some point in CC. So if we go to the character panel, we'll also have all the options to be manipulating this. So all I want you guys to do is just type some word. It could be your name, be whatever you want. I'm gonna type spiders. And you'll select that type. And then you'll, in the character panel, which if you don't have character showing, it's under window and then under type character. So that'll be important to find later. And again, if you're on a Mac computer, you could always go to help, and get whatever you want and try to find where it's at. But so we'll go ahead and select that, and let's make this larger. We want it to even be larger than the maximum offered in the dropdown. So you could just go in there and select it and, put in larger size. If it's too big, we'll just scale it down. 400, too big, 300, cool. And so you don't want it to go all the way to the edge because we're going to play around with it a little bit, and it, once we get to the point of expanding this into objects, we can scale it more. So now that we have this type, this word, I just deselected it with my selection tool. You can see that when we hover on it, we literally just get an underline, right? That underline is our baseline for that word. It's Illustrator showing us that this is actually type. It's not an object yet. It doesn't have vector points. It's just like a smart object that contains type. And if you do have a selection tool, like right now I do, I don't have to switch to the type tool. I could just double click and it'll go right back in. So there are a bunch of things I do want to talk now about, like type design, typographic kind of principles. So these are a little, maybe a little mundane for our class use since we're doing like artistically based type use. But these are important if you go on to be using type for anything. You make a poster. For this example for today, I want you guys to treat this word as like you're designing a logo, right? And so if you think about a logo that you see everywhere, you know, like Adidas, you wouldn't want like huge, you know, a huge gap in like, I don't know, like, does that read well? You know, spiders? Not really. It's not really pleasant to look at, right? And it's not, that's a dramatic example, but you don't always get super accurate spacing between letters. So one of the first tools I like to go over is kerning, which in this program, it calls it tracking. But it's literally that space between letters. And I just remembered I still have to do the quiz. I'm going to write a note. So that I don't forget. So yeah, if you were to select all of the type, you could increase the letter spacing with all of it. However, if you wanted to do right in between two letter forms, you would just have to select the previous letter, and then when you increase or decrease that, it'll only affect right after that letter. So normally when you have letter spacing, you can get away with more spacing, or sorry, less spacing when there's curved letter forms like this. They're enclosed, right? You usually read letters by the negative space as well as the positive. And in this case, we really know it's a P because it's attached both sides to this vertical pipe, right? Same kind of principle with the I. So we could have this much closer than other letter forms. You know, same thing on the other side since it's a D. You could have that pretty tight and it still is going to read fine, right? Whereas letters like this R, because of the nature of the R, you read the R up and to the right. So you have to actually visually have that spacing around the top right. If you don't, if we matched the spacing, like so, this was -48. So if we have -48 here, you can see that it's much more, it feels much more cramped, even though there's a lot of space here, right? It still feels more cramped than this spacing. That's just how letter forms work with one another. Anytime you have that curve, you can get away with a little bit more space. But in general, you usually just want to make things so that they look pleasing, they read pleasing. And usually that means that you want them to all be somewhat unified. So even if I tighten everything up like this, you can still see visually that there's like a lot of space right here. So anyway, that's kerning, tracking. I want you guys to go in and play around with some of these other ones now as well. So getting an idea of what they can do. So if you select a different letter, you know, maybe raise the baseline, shift that baseline up. Select some of the other letters and play with the scale with them. Change some of the fonts. You know, have a couple different varieties in there.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
Are the only fonts available the ones through the Adobe Cloud, or because I have some fonts, like extra fonts I've downloaded onto my computer like a while back that I like to use. So you can only use the ones on Adobe?
Nope. You can use any fonts that you have. Are you on a Mac computer?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that I mentioned real briefly at the end of the last keynote kind of talk, I believe I did. There's an app on the computer called Font Book,
Mm-hmm.
and all you need to do is take those folders of those fonts and drag them into Font Book, and so you're essentially installing them on your Mac.
Oh, okay.
And once they're installed, you should have access to them in any program.
Oh, okay. Thank
Any
you.
program that offers, you know, different fonts.
But my fonts are already like in there though, so all I have to do now is just go to the text inside of Illustrator and find them somehow.
Yeah, in theory, you should be able to just select whatever you're wanting to change, hit that drop down, and then find whatever one you want.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let me know if that doesn't work. Mm-hmm. So yeah, going along with this, we play with letter spacing, baseline shift. There's rotate, obviously. All caps, small caps. What else did I want to talk about? I feel like there's still some stuff that's not offered here. Am I crazy? Type. Font size. Glyphs. Type. I wanted to say there was a little bit more of an option here, but maybe this is all of them. Oh yeah, okay, there's leading. If you had multiple lines, right? You had multiple lines of text and you selected a line, you could change the leading, like how much spacing is there between each line, you know, manually change that. In this case, we're just dealing with one word. So once you guys have something that you've come up with here, we are going to convert this into an object. So I want you guys to grab your selection tool and just select your text box. And again, re-referencing how the baseline is just evident there. even if we hold command right now, we don't see any vector points. But if we go up to Object, Expand, and we hit OK on the object and fill, we should now, this is kind of weird, we should now be able to like hold command and we can see all the vector points. So we've transformed that type into active objects. And somehow this is kind of a goofy thing. I think I've seen this before too. Whatever typeface this was, it doesn't combine, it doesn't like accurately, let's see what this is. Source serif variable. I'm gonna do a test here. This is kind of weird. And if this is like a, I don't know, F, I'm gonna expand it again. Yeah, something's weird about that one font. So maybe you guys have that too. Must just be like a font that was designed in a not a very good way, or I don't know. But you can clearly tell that these are very smooth conversions, and this is a very crappy conversion. So there's something weird about that one font. But anyway, if we were to deselect this and reselect it, like click on one of these letters, everything's still grouped together. Like it's literally, you can't move like one letter independently yet. So in order to get to this is the point where we can just modify content, we need to go up to Object, because this is an object at this point that we're modifying. So we'll be going up to Object quite a lot through this process. And we're just going to ungroup. Object ungroup. And so now if we deselect, right, we click off and we click back on something, it should just be that individual component. And so at this point you could, you know, rotate things or scale things. I'm gonna get rid of this thing. Okay. So now that we have things individually separated here, we can do a little bit of an experiment. The step that I usually go through is this process of making the letter forms look like they're dripping, right? It's taking our conversion one step further and transforming from type to an object into like a modified object, right? Making some kind of theme to this object. So there will be a difference between doing this with a curved line and with straight bottoms. So I'd like you guys to pick something that does have that, if you have that option, you know, like a bottom that has some kind of curved edge and a sharp edge. So I'll do this P. And the one thing to note, as of right now, we can only move the whole object all at once with this selection tool. So that's why they've created a second selection tool in this program, and they refer to it as the direct selection tool. It's that white one that's right under the other one. And the direct selection tool, that's going to allow you to be selecting and moving individual vector points. So if we go ahead and select that, as soon as we select it, we should see that all of these vector points are now highlighted. And we can tell they're all highlighted because they're solid blue. Now, they're blue, again, because that layer is, the layer is blue, the highlight color of that layer. And so at this point, even though we changed to the direct selection, if we were to like click and drag one of these points, it's still moving the whole shape because we went from having a whole object selected to still having a whole object selected. If we want individual points to be selected, we have to just click and let go on one, and you should then see everything else turns to white, like transparent, kind of like empty white for everything else. And the one that you selected is now that solid blue. So now if you move it, it will move freely. Similarly, if you were to have nothing selected, right, if you click off, and then you hover over till you find an anchor point, and then you click and let go, only that one will be selected, right? Previously, we had the entire thing selected with the selection tool, right? And then we went into the direct, which kind of converts from a full selection into still a full selection, but we're focusing on different elements, right? So understanding how that works really can help you out over time, because as you need to modify components, the ways in which you're able to select those components really will be beneficial. So say, for example, I only want to move this bottom piece of this P. I want to do it all at one time. I don't want to sit here and like move this anchor over and then this anchor over, right? Like that, it would take too long and it's really horrendous. You can literally just use this direct selection tool and like drag over top of all of them. Or if you really wanted to, you could hold shift and click each one. But once you have just those that you want selected, right, those are all blue, you could then move it. So it's really nice to be able to get in and see how these basic building blocks are working. Because now that we have an understanding of how these vector points are here, we can start to modify. And the other element that I didn't talk about, all of these are kind of flat, but anything that's rounded, we do get those curves, and we can modify those handles, or I should say we can modify the curves with the handles, right? And so each curve you can go as far as you want or as close as you want, but the angle of which will also affect the back end as well. So it's kind of like a tug of war happening. So in order to make some dripping, we can't just simply like, rotate this or something and pull it down. It kind of looks like it could be dripping, but we can make it look more detailed than that. So what we need to do is add some points. And all we need to do is go to our pen tool, and we could either click and hold on that pen tool and select the add anchor point tool, or me personally, I just like to quickly tap the pen tool and then use the plus key on my keyboard, right? You're just kind of plus or minus, you're switching from adding the point, and then you can hover over that path and add the point somewhere, or you could hit the minus key and click on a point and it'll subtract. There was a new, what was the new note? I wrote it in here, I think. Did I add it in here? I already forgot it, whatever it is. Oh, shift key. So you guys see this, you guys see this curved point right here? If I were to take the pen tool and just subtract that point, it's gonna just put kind of like the closest curved path possible between the only other existing points. So you're not really cutting the image, so to speak. It's still a solid shape, but it doesn't do it as naturally as it could. Say if you're just trying to simplify how many points there are, right? Say if you went around here and you just like added way too many points, and now, you know, modifying these is really hard because you have too many. Well, you could use the minus function and hover over the different anchors and delete them, but it's kind of like changing the overall shape. Whereas they added a new feature in Photoshop, or sorry, in Illustrator now in CC, that if you hold shift while minusing a point, it attempts to retain that curvature by like altering the other handles for you. So it's just like, it's a very minor thing to mention, but it definitely can be really helpful if you're in close like this quite frequently. So yeah, anywho, all I wanted you really guys to do is just add like 2 extra points or something like that. Then once you have them added, switch over to that direct selection tool, which is A on the keyboard. And we just want to move this stuff around and change the angles of the handles to start to establish a sense of dripping. Okay, and then on the bottom here, not only do I want you to do it on the rounded parts like we just did, but also now down here on these sharp edges that don't have any handles, right? You click on an anchor, there's no handles. In this instance, I already have enough points down here to modify to make like a drip. You guys might be on a different letter, you might need to add a point or two. But the point is that these don't have handles. How do we get handles? Well, there is a quick way they've established now. I don't know how I feel about it though. Like if I zoom in here and I click on one of the anchors and let go, you'll notice that it has like this now like little fuzzy circle pop up next to your anchor, up to your vector. And if you were to click on that and drag, you actually can round the shape out. But, and then if you click on each one of those, you do have handles. But the handles are limited. There's only a handle on one side. So while that is kind of like a nice little, maybe time-saving feature, I don't really like it because it doesn't give you full freedom. So if you just undo that, if you did it, again, I'm going to click on a corner. And this time, if we go up to the pen tool and we click and hold on the panel, we want to have the anchor point tool. We want to use that. And using that anchor point tool, we have the ability at clicking and dragging out a vector point, which will create like a symmetrical handles, which we can then modify further, right? So in this example, I want to be doing that for all of these points that are on the bottom of my letter form, because then I can craft them into a way that they're dripping, right? And I might even do one of these in between ones. And if you need more points, you just switch back to the pen tool with your plus arrow, and you can add a couple. Looks like I did have to add a couple in the end. Okay. And once you guys get something close to making it look like it's, got some fluidity going on there, that's all we need for right now. Just kind of serving its purpose. Unless you're like me and you want to keep grinding just because you are very anal with how you want something to look. So yeah, from this point on, we can create some drips, some like water droplet looking things. Just a quick example of like how if you need something, you can just literally just craft it, you know. You don't have to go out and mine the resources. It's a bad Minecraft joke. I've never played Minecraft, so. I'm doing this without saying anything. This next little segue here, I'd like to show you guys how to utilize guides, and this will, give you a little bit of, I don't know, the guides will guide you. How about that? Command R, Control R, I believe, on PC, brings up the guides. By default, they're set to, I believe they're probably set to inches. Mine are currently on pixels. You can always right-click it and change. If you're working for print, you could get a sense of what that is. Anyway, if you hover up there, no matter what tool you're on, right? I could be on a pen tool. If you hover up there, you're going to get a little cursor. So I want you to do is like click and drag down below your letter form down here and let go. You get a cyan line, and do the same thing from the left-hand side so that you get one dragged out to the right, which is kind of below one of the drips, right? So we should have crosshairs happening. And so I want you guys just to have the regular pen tool at this point so that we can maybe zoom in a tiny bit and move down here. And all we're going to do is use these guides as a system to help us draw this little drop. So this drop, it involves 4 clicks, and we're only making 3 points. The 4th click is just ending at the origin. So first one is we just click and release here at the top. Okay. We're going to come down to the bottom right here, and we're going to click and drag. And we're going to drag it down just a little bit so we get like kind of a curve going, like a natural raindrop would look like. And at this point, you would probably want the tendency to like create another point down here. We don't need that. We just need to go right over to the other side, about equal distance apart from what your second point was. And again, we're going to click and drag. And as long as we kind of have a similar like mirroring happening between the right and left, when we let go, that should be pretty symmetrical. And then we just have to point back up to the top and click on the origin to make that point, to make the raindrop. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect because at this point you can modify it. This is a good point where I usually like to also show you a quick way to do a copy and paste. So if you guys, once you have this done, hopefully you guys don't dwell on it too long, you're able to make it. Grab your selection tool, and if you right click on this, notice we don't have any like copy and paste stuff, right? So you have to actually do like a Command C, Command V, and then it pastes it in a different spot. And depending on what you had your selection being, like it could be weird. So what I usually like to show you guys is that if you hold Option, like if you, well, first I guess you have to select the object. And then if you hold Option, you get a secondary little pointer, selection pointer. And when now when you drag and drop it, it'll just duplicate it for you. So you could just continually just drag and drop and while holding Option, and that would duplicate it. So I mention this now because you could just put these little drops wherever you have a spot where it might drip, and then you could just scale some of them. You can go into others and modify these handles so they look more like they're really drippy. Right. And then if you want to get rid of those guides, you could just go up to View and then Guides and Hide Guides. Right. So, I mean, realistically, like if you're doing this the first time, it takes a little while to figure out the process and go through it. But I mean, now that you know how to do it, I mean, for one letter, it should only take you like, 5 minutes tops. And it's just one example of how we're, modifying type, but let me take a quick look at our example here, exercise. Yeah, warp, make with mesh, knife, pathfinder. Yeah, we have a lot of time. I've been breezing right on through with you guys. It's always quicker to do the second time in a day. So I think I probably have been going a little quicker. Anybody have any backed up confusion or problems going on? We have
Can you
plenty
go
of time.
over how to revectorize the text again one more time?
Oh, so we have some kind of type here, and we just have to have it selected, and we can go up to object expand.
Thank you.
Yep. You could also right click on it. There's create outlines. It's basically doing the same thing. I prefer to show you guys the expand because anytime you don't have vectors, you could always use the expand. It's kind of like your one-stop shop. But then you also, once you expand it, all of those, like because it was separate pieces, when you expand it, it's going to automatically still have them all grouped together as one piece. So you still have to go up and ungroup them before they can move separately. Or I might take a couple minute break here because my jaw is like been talking nonstop. You know, it's like COVID time. You're all just sitting around at home, not doing anything. You might like yell and play with the puppy or something. You know, talk to people like once a week, and then get on something like this and you talk for 4 hours. It's a workout. It's a workout, dudes. It's a workout for your jaw. No, but we're really far ahead, and it's really weird for me to have both classes at different stages. So yeah, why don't you guys just play around for a few minutes on a couple of this, and then I'll be right back, and we can kind of wrap up with the other stuff. Additionally, if you guys think of any questions for project one, you know, you could ask those here in a second. Back. Anybody got something for me? Okay.
Wait, actually, I got a question.
Yeah.
So how would you like center a bunch of like ungrouped vectorized objects?
There's a, I mean, you could do it manually. You could always have a guide and then, you know, use the guide to have it like snap. But if you wanted to do it in a more, you know, unified kind of easier way, you could just select all of those pieces. And there's options up here in the options panel called align. And then you can have a multitude of different ways. So like align it by the top, or align it by the middle, or align it by, or I don't know if these are for, I don't even know if I've used these other ones. You're primarily just going to use these centered ones, you know. I'm assuming this is what you're referring to.
What if like I wanted to like keep it in like the same order that changed it around into, you know, like so you don't have the spiders as like all manipulated and stuff, and when you centered it, it like all like got overlapped and stuff. How would I?
That's
have
because
it,
I
like,
centered it vertically. If I
Okay.
wanted to center it horizontally. Hang on a second. I just got to go to this and then center sorry, it's called center vertically. Whatever. Center horizontal line. I always have it backwards apparently. But yeah, if I did it with this one, obviously it's just going to all combine because it's designed for, you know, being vertical. But yeah. So everybody's good on project one then as well? Okay. It's probably like the least amount of extra time outside of class that I've ever had teaching this class. So hopefully you guys are all doing okay. Nobody's been showing up to office hours or anything either, so. What's next? Oh, we're going to warp with mesh. So why don't we select one of our other letters that we have not yet modified, or at least to a great extent. And we'll zoom into it so it's fairly larger. And we're going to go up to object. And we're going to go to envelop, distort, and make with mesh. And having the preview on here is helpful. This letter isn't too big. It's kind of like a block size. And it's fairly small on my page. So I'm just going to have 2 rows, 2 columns for simplicity's sake. If you had a larger one, you could have a couple more maybe. But once you get into having, you know, way too many, it becomes hard to modify it, and it's not. Then it becomes like not worth your time. The whole point of this is like to aid your alterations, I guess. So have just a couple there and hit OK. And now if we switch to our direct selection tool, we can now see that these are actually vector points based on a grid now, rather than the object. So it's like an overlay. And as we modify them, it's modifying the object. So this is actually a decent example where my R is like inside this S, but it was very, it looked very, you know, not blending well. So at this point I could, you know, try to make it wrap inside here a little bit better. Same with this top edge to some extent. Oops. And, you know, once you have something that's somewhat plausible, whatever you're doing with it, you could just leave it there. I mean, if you always want to come back and have that ability to modify it as it is, totally can. But beyond modifying with this make with mesh, it really doesn't have much ability to be manipulated. So what I usually say is to re-expand it, going back up to object expand, and then it's back to its original shape, which has its, you know, new vector points. Mm-hmm. I'm going to try this actually as well. So you see, you guys don't have to do this. I'm just going to show you because it's a new feature. See when I hold command here, I get a preview of all my vector points. Well, because I just distorted something from what it originally was, it kind of just performed that process by adding new points wherever it needed to kind of alter itself. And I really have more points here than I need. And doesn't matter whatsoever for you guys. I'm just showing you that there's a new feature that it does help to simplify things in certain circumstances. And they actually have a feature now in Illustrator that allows you to just go to path and simplify. This is the first time I'm trying it. And so if I hold command while doing it, it shows you what would happen if you simplify that shape. And originally it had way more than 17. So that's what it looks like now. And then this is what it looked like before. After, before. It barely has changed it, but it has less points. So, you know, if you kind of keep up with this, I guess this is kind of, if I want to make like a comparison, this is kind of like how many polygons you have, you know, in like a 3D model. The more complexity you have over time, you're just compounding processing and the save time and all of those things. So I guess if you're working very large, very complex files, it can be good to do. But anywho, continuing on, let's take another shape. I'm going to take yes. And with this S, we're going to use the knife tool, which is underneath, it's like 2 underneath your type tool. It'll show the eraser probably by default. The knife is the second one down. So the knife is nice because it actually allows you to create 2 separate pieces. And you want to think of the knife as like a box cutter or what do you call it? an X-Acto knife, where you start, you know, if you had something flat on a surface, you'd start before that piece you're cutting and go all the way through it, and then, you know, continue a little, like follow through. Similar process. You start out here, you click, and you drag through, right? And that could be any way. You could like curve it or whatever you want to do, right? And yeah, so I'm just gonna do that. And then same thing is just like, oh no, it is ungrouped. I thought it was grouped for some reason. So I want you guys to take a piece of that type of that letter and move it down, and then we'll just delete it for now. We could have just used like the eraser, to be honest, but there are circumstances where you could do that, and then, you know, you could use that separate piece as, you know, for something else, you know, whatever way you want to work. But I now want to get into a preliminary utilization of Pathfinder. So let's all take the ellipse tool, or basically let's take one of these shape tools that will allow you to replace back what you took off of that letter. So it might be, you know, a couple of ellipses, star, I don't know. And we're just gonna get close and put a shape on there. You can readjust it if you want. I'm gonna rotate mine a bit more. And I think I'm also gonna add a star. I'm gonna add two things. Yeah, I think I'm gonna.
Some people are saying that the knife tool's not showing up for you. So if you click the three little dots on the left of your toolbar, it should give you all the tools that you can choose from. And you can click and drag and put it wherever you want on your hotbar.
Yeah, if you don't have it there, if it's not underneath of the eraser, I guess number one, I'm confused as to why. It might be because maybe you didn't change to typography, and maybe that's a standard on typography. I don't know. But yeah, the three little dots, thanks for that. The three little dots allows you to find other tools, and then you could drag that out. And then there was another question I didn't see. I wish there was like a noise. Why don't I get noises? When there's a message that comes up, maybe it's a preference. I'll have to look into it. How do you change the shape back to normal? You just expand. So you have that. Anything that's not in a shape, not like directly editable vector points, you should be able to select it and expand it. The only exceptions to that would be like importing files. In that case, we'd have to talk about another process, like if you import an image or something. So anyhow, so now if we have all of this selected, right? You select all these points, like you select one, hold shift, you select the other, select this one. You should have them all overlapping to some extent, whatever you have that's replacing, right? And then we're gonna join these all together. So rather than them being separate shapes, they're all one shape. It's like a new shape that we're making. So what you need to do is go to Window and turn on Pathfinder if it is not on already. And if I didn't yet mention, Pathfinder's like my favorite tool in here. And it allows you to really be pretty creative. There are some limitations to it, and you really don't know how it's going to react until you use it. Once you start to get like very large masses of objects and you're starting to manipulate those, that's when you might run into some conundrums. I like to find those as like a challenge and figure out how to, you know, get beyond that. Because realistically, playing with shapes, I mean, Pathfinder's like, you're always doing something new, right? You're always creating something new. So anyhow, once you have this open, you have your shapes combined or selected that you want to combine. We're just going to use that first option called Unite. And that'll allow it to all be combined together. Another example would be like if I were to change the color of this so you guys can see, and I move this I over top of the D. If I then select these points and I could do a divide. And so after some of these steps, they will be grouped together. You know, you could deselect, reselect, everything's still combined. So some of these steps you will have to do an ungroup, but then you should be able to notice that they're different pieces. Right, and so Pathfinder is going to be a pretty awesome tool for you guys to experiment with. Just to give you maybe, is this going to work? Why don't I have? Why can't I see anything? Oh, okay. It's kind of weird that I don't see my whole selection unless I hold Command, but that is weird. Maybe I just got to restart Illustrator for some reason. Is there a select inverse? There is. Ooh, ah. So you could do pretty awesome things. So let me give you a quick example. I don't want you guys to follow this, but if I draw this star, right? I have this star here. I could place a gradient on that star. And the gradient tool is pretty expansive in this as well. Where is gradient? Over here. You know, you could do all these crazy things. Okay, so all these different colors. Then I could take the spiders and I could group it. I'll just group it for now. And I'll bring down spiders. And sometimes like this, you see how the spider's like behind the star. You can always right click on elements. Everything's in the same layer, right? You can always right click on elements and do like an arrange, bring to front, you know, push to back. All that stuff's under object arrange as well. What I'm trying to do here is create like a different selection using spiders. And if I select that, yeah, it's only selecting those as a shape. I was going to do something different that I haven't tried before, but it wasn't going to work. I don't think it's going to work. So in this instance, I could select everything, which is the star and all these spiders, and I could minus front, and that would allow all of my shapes to cut out. But you can see how it does goofy things sometimes, right? like it creates a separate like gradient. So in that event, sometimes you have to do pieces by themselves. So you could do that and then minus front. This and this, minus front. Nope, still doing it. How about split it? Yeah, there it goes. So now this could be ungrouped. Now it's there. So there's multiple ways of doing things, and it's just a matter of playing around. But you can get pretty complicated, you know, with your use of Pathfinder. So I just wanted to give you guys a couple of examples. I think that was about it for today. Oh, I did cover one other tool. So let's just do that real quick so that we're caught up with the other class. Let's just take the pen tool, back to the pen tool, and we'll, how about we do this? Let's rename this first layer as part 1. Let's lock it and hide it and create a new layer. Call that part 2. And on this part 2 layer, we'll use the pen tool. So let's just make a kind of a twirly line here. Is it like a weird wavy line, right? Get something out, and then you can hit escape. And we really just want the outline of this, so we could reverse that color. Right, it's just black now. And let's go to the type tool and click and hold to get the type on a path tool. And the way type on a path works is you literally just have to hover it over top of any path. And once it acknowledges there's a path, it'll allow you to, you know, it'll say path, and you can click and it'll put placeholder text in there. And it's going to just default to the last settings you had. So, you know, you could change it to anything. Change the scale down. And I wanted you guys to be, I guess, somewhat obnoxious with this so you can see how not all lines are going to be really great for, you know, drawing on text or using for text to be drawn on. However, from this point, you can go back to the selection tool, and there are these, this wasn't working last class, but for me, but there are these vertical lines. Do you see them? You should be able to grab those and drag them around, which will allow you to move the type from like left to right, or you can flip the type to the other side of the line, right? And this could be helpful. So like, for example, if you had an ellipse and you use the type on a path on the ellipse, right? Everything would come up on the outside, but if you switch back to your selection tool, you could flip it into the inside. And then it's kind of like a very quick way of creating some kind of shape. And from that point on, though, you can still modify everything. It's just going to change the type along with it. Just like any other type, you can still go in there and manipulate it until you're satisfied. And then you could also, you know, expand whatever you're playing with. So yeah, type on a path it could be nice to work with, depending on what you're trying to do. Sometimes it's done like poorly, I guess. You know, like here, this is just like a quick example, but you could just clearly tell this is just a blob. It's not really too meaningful. You know, it's like you scribbled and then put some words in there. What is that really meaning, right? But 4 minutes left. What to talk about in 4 minutes? Well, this is all objects now. If I pathfind it, it's combined objects. And then can I add a add individual gradients?
I have a quick question about this type on a path.
Yup.
So if we were to like make a shape and stuff like that, is there a way to make the text closer to the line of that shape, or should we make the shape a lot bigger? Like how it was with this circle, at least, it was very much like inside. Like I'm not exactly sure how to explain, but
yeah,
there was like the ring. There was the ring of the circle, and then there was like a really large like white gap between the edge of that circle and where the bottom of the text started. Is there a way to minimize that gap, or should we just make the shapes bigger so we can overcome that sort of problem?
I don't know if it's just I couldn't do two things at once, but can you say it again? I'm not going to play.
How there's like the shape creates its like basic line basically, and how there's a large gap between the outside of that line and where the bottom of the text starts. Is there a way to minimize that gap?
Well, right now my baseline shift is 98. So if you set that to 0,
Okay.
Like I said, if it defaulted to some other last setting that you had of some sort, if you did play with the baseline before, it probably just took one of those numbers.
Okay. I just wasn't sure if it was something that's consistent through the program or not. But, all right.
Yeah, that should be it. Does anybody else have any questions? Well, that's about it for today. Like I said, on Wednesday, we're going to be chatting in groups. Just make sure you have your images up in time. I think that's really all I had to cover today. I was really thinking we were going to get through all of this today. I forgot it was in 2 parts. Not that the other one's going to take a whole class, but I also did add a little bit more info section on Pathfinder, just so you guys get like another example. Oh, and if I didn't talk about this, I think this is why my first class went a little longer. For those of you especially who are a little bit more familiar with Illustrator, you should definitely be checking out supplemental content, such as these that I just linked the other day. These are new features for Illustrator CC that are really, gives you more dynamic effects with your type. I mean, you could do this with anything, but they're specifically using it with type, and I thought it's fitting because we're doing a type project. So, you know, definitely worth checking out. There's hundreds and thousands of guides, but those ones seem to be easy enough of a transition between like what we traditionally play around with and what's new. So anyhow, if you guys don't have any questions, I'll see you Wednesday.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.